second, but when you hear the term like patient provider communication, like what do you think about? Like what's the ideal circumstance for that?
I definitely think there's like a balance to a patient provider communication. Like it definitely can't be all the provider because then they're not hearing the patient out and it's just kind of like a cookie cutter situation. But at the
Right.
same time, like the patient can't be all knowing. Like Google can't be your only source of information.
Hmm.
So it definitely needs to be like a conversation. And I think sometimes providers have like a God complex of like, you know, they are all knowing and what you say doesn't really matter because they seem to know what's wrong more than you
Hmm.
do. But in some circumstances that might be, but I felt like I was trying to explain symptoms that I barely could understand, but what they were like interpreting it as wasn't what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
And so that was hard because it was just like it felt like miscommunication, but they weren't willing to really like change their ideas and what their opinions of what they think
Exactly.
was wrong with me was.
Hmm. Right. And so I think, there's so many studies and articles that talk about like how patients and providers communicate can affect, patient outcomes because essentially,
Right.
you're not gonna, like you talked about with the medication, you're getting these excuse me, lists of medications and it's like very overwhelming. How do I go about this in a way that works for
Right.
me and in a way that my doctor, can work with me. Um,
Right. And honestly, there's like statistics that show like people with POTS have been misdiagnosed for years, and it takes like an average of 7 years for them to actually get a clear diagnosis of what's going on
yeah.
because the symptoms are so broad and there's so many of them that it can fall under so many different things. Like
Hmm.
my symptoms could mean that I have like a multitude of things, but in reality, like POTS is a collective of symptoms and it's not like a pure like you have this issue and this is how you can solve it. It's
Right.
those things are still unknown. It's unknown
Hmm.
how it's caused and it's unknown how it's cured. And
Right.
so
So
it's
in
kind of a
terms of
blanket.
that, and I think I kind of want to spring off of what you just said. So as far as like when you were diagnosed with POTS and you leave the office and you're like, okay, I have this thing called POTS supposedly, and I don't understand or, kind of where to go next. Um, as far as like communal coping, um, and communal coping is essentially defined as a process in which a stressful event is, um, appraised and acted upon in the context of a close relationship. So I guess in, fifth grade reading level terms that you just have a community support and you have a social support system through your diagnosis. Did
Hmm.
that go through your mind at all after you were diagnosed? Like, is there a support group? Is there, outlets and resources for me?
Yeah, because it was 2020, things were kind of crazy with the pandemic, and so
Yeah.
not much was going on like physically in person with people. And also at that point, I knew no one, like I hadn't heard of it before. And so I didn't know of people that had gone through it, but so I did search like well, actually, to be honest, at first it was such like a scary thing that I was like, if I can just like not think about it, maybe it just won't
Yeah.
exist.
Just like
But
put it under the rug.
yeah, but I couldn't do that, but I didn't want to
Yeah.
look things up. And so my family and my boyfriend at the time's family was super active on like researching things and figuring things out for me because for me like looking into it was that was what anxiety like where my anxiety came from. Like I have dealt with that because of POTS now because the unknown of POTS is anxiety producing and
Oh, absolutely.
led to
Yeah.
more like exaggerated symptoms. And so like they helped me with that. And I think if it weren't for my family and my boyfriend at the time, like I really feel like this would have sent me into like depression and just a deep like uncertainty of life because it was so scary and really like heartbreaking for me
Hmm.
because I'm such like an active person and it was just really hard for me to like
Total
face something
180. Yeah.
and not know anyone. But
Right.
since then I definitely have like seeked other people. Like now I have two really close people in my life that also have pots,
Hmm.
and I know
Yeah, I was
other
going to
people.
ask you about that, like, meeting people. Have you met people with pots
Yeah,
that you've
and
just gotten closer with?
yeah, it's definitely something that's caused a good friend of mine like from high school that's now it's like she's like the bestest friend I could have ever imagined because like it's so different when you can relate to somebody on that level because no one
Mhm.
else seems to get you. And then you meet somebody and they're just like, I literally deal with that too. Like, I totally get it. And my brother's wife has it. And like, she wasn't in the picture like for a while. And then all of a sudden she comes around, like, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's another person. And of course, she's close in my life as well.
Yeah.
But that those two people have met other people with POTS, and it seems like now POTS is becoming a really common diagnosis,
Hmm.
and that leads me to believe that there are definitely causes to this that people just
Yeah.
aren't like looking into.
Right. They don't
But
know about, and they don't, yeah, there's
right,
enough research and, or
yeah,
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the
And
commonalities, which is crazy, but it's sad, but it's really like helpful to know that there's other people that I know like in person, but I definitely have people online as well that I've looked at and talked to and yeah,
yeah, been able to, have that communal coping. So yeah, one of the big things I wanted to focus on in this conversation, you definitely touched on it, was communal coping and social support for pods. And I think when that comes to mind, we think, immediately like a support group or, having those friends, which is phenomenal and it's so needed. But I think it also goes along with having, like you said, your boyfriend at the time and your family there to kind of walk this with you and kind of be your caretakers in a way, and like
definitely. Oh my
just
gosh.
kind of dig in the trenches with you. And I think that's so important. A lot of people take that for granted, and it sounds like you didn't, because you really honed in on that and dug into those relationships, which was super beneficial to your experience.
Oh my gosh. I that was so that was honestly I feel like more valuable at the time because I didn't want to like bring more awareness to POTS. Like I really just wanted to like figure out myself and what I needed
Hmm.
versus like finding more out about POTS and like kind of scaring myself at the beginning. And so I
Hmm.
think it was so much more valuable for me to have William and my parents and his parents and now like it's the same like with you. Like I think most of my like everybody that I am close to knows about it. Um and some people it's just like at first I just didn't want to tell anybody, but now I feel
Right.
like I've gotten to a point where it's like, yeah, this is just a thing. Like, and it makes
Yeah.
me feel people know just because then it's like I'm not canceling plans because like I hate you or I don't, but I just like it's just helpful for people to know now.
Hmm.
Um, and it's not as like tragic for me, even though sometimes it
Right.
can. But I think overall I've gotten more used to it and it's thanks to like really thanks to the people that were close to me in the first few months.
Absolutely.
I didn't even drive. William drove me everywhere I went
Hmm.
and like cuz it was so new and so
Hmm.
uncomfortable, but it was really really valuable to have them in my life